Hey guys, it's Allison, and I thought it was long past time where I actually pulled out my kit from Simon Says Stamp for April and played with it. I actually got notification today that my next kit, my May kit, is waiting to be picked up, so it's definitely past time for me to play with this one. So as you can see, I have the basically the full kit. I had used a little strip of that green paper on another card, but otherwise everything is there. And so I've decided I want to start with the Distress Oxide inks and that stencil. Those are kind of my sort of hardest items, I guess, in the kit, the ones that will give me the most challenge, so I figure I might as well start playing with them and get them out of the way. I'm just getting things ready by creating some card bases. That's what you saw me do there. Alright, so now I am adhering the stencil to my mat, and there's a couple of butterflies that go off the edge of one side, so I mask them off with my washi tape there. And this is the blending brush that came in the kit, so I thought I would give it a try. And I'm just dabbing it on the ink pad and then dabbing it onto the stencil. But because I wasn't sure how clean it got after the blue, I smeared the yellow ink onto my work surface and then dabbed it from there. I didn't want to contaminate the whole ink pad, but I figured if I just smeared it on my work surface and then used it from there, if there was a little bit of contamination from the blue, it wouldn't matter so much. So it's very subtle, but I have gotten a blended image with the butterflies. Some of them are more solid, but most of them have a good blending of the yellow and the blue, and there's even some instances where the two colors are blended together and I get a nice green color. But the butterflies are not very clear, so I decide to stamp over top of the stenciled image with a blue Stampin' Up color. It's my favorite blue. It's called Island Indigo. And it's a bit maybe of a too dark a blue, but I just keep going. And then I had pulled one of the sentiments from the stamp set and I had inked it up, and then I was trying to find a spot on my little stenciled piece there to fit it in, and it wasn't really fitting. It was going to go over some of the butterflies. So I decided to stamp it onto a scrap piece of cardstock, and then I will cut it out and lay it over top. And then to get the Distress Oxide ink sort of moving around a bit, I did spritz it with some water. I did get a little bit of reaction from my Stampin' Up ink too, but I think it's okay. It does give a nice sort of watercolored effect. And now I'm just getting the base ready, and I decide that I want to brighten up the card with a bit of that rainbow paper. So I've cut a strip, it's about 1 inch wide right now, and so I'm just trimming off a little bit from my stenciled image, and then I decide that I actually want the rainbow on both sides of that, so I trim my 1 inch piece into 2 1/2 inch pieces, and then I will put my stenciled image down the middle. And I have my sentiment already cut out, so I'm just going to put some foam squares behind it and place it on. Popping it up gives it that nice dimension, and because it's white on white, that separation is good. And now I think it just needs a little bit of sort of glitter, and I do have the foil in the kit, but for this one I wanted something with a bit more dimension, so I pull out my silver Nuevo crystals and add dots on them, and there you see the finished card. Okay, so now I'm getting ready to do card number 2, and I've got 4 colors now of Distress Oxide inks, and so I decide I'm going to pull all of them in and create sort of a single layer card using all the different colors. But I do want to make this a happy birthday card, so I have one sentiment from the stamp set that came with a kit. That's the, what is it, Have a Beautiful Day or something like that. And then my favorite happy birthday stamp from the Brush Strokes stamp set. That was from a kit from I think last year. and I've used that in like a hot pink, which is a Stampin' Up! Ink. And now I'm just taking 3 different sizes of the sort of stained glass butterflies and stamping them with all the different colors of ink. And then I also have 2 little solid butterflies as well that I will stamp. So I initially just use 1 size with 1 color, basically. And then once I have all 4 colors represented on the card, I can fill in the gaps with the other stamps and the other colors and just keep adding until I'm happy with the composition. The yellow is not showing up very well on camera, I'm afraid, so apologies for that, but there is yellow on the card in those sort of empty spaces that you see there. So I'm just continuing to fill in until I'm happy with it. And then it's a matter of mounting it on to a card base. And I decide that I want to add some color behind this. I don't want to mount this onto white. So there's this lovely dark blue in the kit, and I just cut one of the pieces in half and score it. And so I have my top folding 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. And I must have got my measurements wrong because it's not quite centered, and I have to trim a little bit off the bottom. And it looks great, but I decide that it needs a little something extra. So now it's time for me to pull in that foil. And I've never used this before, so I'm just trying to figure out the best adhesive. So I put a few dots of my matte medium on a scrap piece of paper and see what the foil does to that, but it kind of goes all over the place. So I know it's going to need a more dry adhesive than the matte medium. So I've just pulled out some bling glue dots. They're like really tiny glue dots, and I'm just scattering them around on the card. Normally when I scatter things on cards, I have a little bit more control over where they go, but because I can't totally see where I'm putting them, it's a little bit of sort of blind faith. And then I just lay the foil on top, and I'm using my bone folder to press it down where I can feel the dots. And there you see I do have some beautiful little silver dots all over my card. Okay, so ready for another card, and I'm going to start with that piece of rainbow paper, and I just take another look through the 6x6 paper pad just to make sure that yes, I really do want to use this rainbow piece, and I do. So I'm going to put that down. This time I have my card in landscape orientation, and I'm just taking a look at all the butterflies, and I decide I'm going to emboss them in white and then use all those distress inks to color them in, because they are these beautiful sort of stained glass look. So I'm going to try and create really colorful butterflies. The white embossing powder helps keep the colors sort of contained, I guess, if you want to call it that, when you're using the water. It doesn't run all over the place and make a big old mess. So I've just pressed all 4 colors onto my mat, and I've kind of got them in rainbow order. Well, I guess not really, because the green's at the end, but and I'm mixing them together and really messily painting my butterflies with the different colors, like really messy and super fast. And then I'm going to put that aside to dry. Oh, I did dab off some of the extra moisture just to try and make that white pop out a bit more. But I'm going to put that aside to dry and work on my next card. And I want to go a little bit more sort of traditional. I've been using a lot of the sort of mixed media techniques so far, so I've decided that this time I'm going to go just a little bit more traditional with stamping and pattern paper. So I have the base of the green, and once again I've trimmed it funny, so the bottom didn't have the right sort of border around it, and I did a real hatchet job when I tried to trim it. So I've decided I just need to cover that up. So I grab a piece of rainbow paper and add a decorative edge to it, and then I'm just cutting it now. It's about 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches, I guess, by the time it's all trimmed out. And that's just going to go along the bottom, and it's going to hide my messy cut job. And it just adds, it brightens up the card as well, adds a nice decorative touch. So now I'm pulling out various sentiments. There's a lot of little sentiments on the stamp set that are sort of encouraging words. So I'm pulling out several of those, and I've also got my black Stays-On ink. And I have a couple of different Stays-On ink pads. One is juicier than the other, so I'm sort of have my fingers crossed to hopefully that this will stamp well, and it has so far, so I think I'm good. So I've got the 2 butterflies stamped, and then I decide to stamp a third, and it doesn't stamp properly. So I'm saying a lot of nasty words is what I'm really doing, and I won't repeat them to you. But I pull in my MISTI and I give my stamp a good clean so that I can attempt to line it up there and hopefully be able to stamp it so that it's all nice and clean. But it's slightly offset, and I'm quite ticked with myself, and I'm wondering how I can fix this. And I realize that I have more of that paper, so perhaps if I line up the paper in the exact same spot, I can stamp it again, cut it out, and put it over top, and no one will ever know. So this is what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to line it up and get it stamped exactly in the same spot that the other one is stamped in. So I ink up my stamp again, and it's still not clear. But when I go to pull the window down again, the paper has moved. So I don't restamp it. I don't want to get another image that's doubled. So I pull it off, yell and scream, and then I realize that I can just take a black marker and just fill it in. And so that's what I do. I did have to walk away for a few minutes though, and yeah. So I have filled it in with a black marker, and I'm going to cut it out. And I will put some foam squares behind that butterfly, and once it's popped up on the card, even though I don't think I got it stamped in exactly the same spot, it looks really good actually. So I've got all my butterflies stamped on there. Now it's time to get the messages in, and I don't want to add more black to the card, so I decide I'm going to use my white embossing powder since it's still out. It's off camera right now, but it's still handy for me. So I just use my my little chalk pouch there just to make sure that my embossing powder only sticks to where I want it to stick. And then I have 3 messages that I've stamped so far. And I'll get those embossed. And clearly I did not do a good job of using my anti-static tool because there was a few areas that were a bit messy. And then what I did there was I added some glue to the bodies of the butterfly, and I put it aside to dry, and I'm going to put the foil on it. So while that's drying, I move back to my other card. My butterflies are dry, so I cut them out and I lay them down on the card, and I realize there's not enough contrast. So I've pulled this yellow paper, and I'm going to cut a strip of it and use the same decorative border punch that I have on my desk and punch it on both sides. And then I can also use that strip to stamp my sentiment on. It'll show up quite nicely against that bright yellow, whereas against all that rainbow pattern, it probably wouldn't show up so well. And I'm using the blue ink that was in the kit, and I will get that glued down. I purposely put the sentiment off to the side. I think things are nicer when they're not necessarily all lined up in a row. having it a little bit offset adds some interest. And now I'm attaching my butterflies. So what I'm doing is one wing is getting foam squares and the other wing is getting flat adhesive. And that way it's almost like they are in flight. They're sort of half popped up from the page. And now that I have that yellow, and I've also added the dimension of popping them up from the page, they stand out better from the background. They don't blend in so well, and they actually look quite nice. So now my glue on that one is dry, so I bring in the silver foil and just put it in the 3 little bodies there. And there you can see it. It's just very subtle, but it's kind of a fun touch. And for this one, my finishing touch is to add some Nouveau drops. And I initially was going to add this silver, and I decided that wasn't enough contrast. So I have a bottle of turquoise as well, which works really well with the colors I've got going. So I'm adding some turquoise drops to this. And there's the finished card. I really like those butterflies, actually. They're just gorgeous. I wasn't sure about them when I was cutting them out, but now that they're all finished and on the card, I can see that it was a good idea. Okay, so now I'm ready to make one more card. And for this one, I kind of want to keep things simple. So I have the rest of that yellow paper, and I just want to put it in the middle of the card. So I decide I need something behind it. And I like this rainbow stripe. And I'm going to have the rainbows go horizontally. And I decide that, like my first card, I'm going to have 2 thin strips on either side of the center panel. So I'm just getting adhesive onto everything so that I can figure out my best arrangement. And I'm trying to decide, do I want the rainbows on top or beneath? And I decide I do want them on top. So I'm going to get this yellow panel adhered first. And then I can line up the 2 rainbow striped pieces on either side. And now I decide that I have this 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape, and I thought that I could use the foil to create a nice little silver accent. So that's what I do. It was a little bit of a learning curve on that side because I had to use my bone folder to get into the crease of where the 2 papers join. But once I figured out exactly how I needed to adhere those, then it worked out quite well. And now I can just stamp in the center there. And I've decided to use the blue and the pink and just sort of mix them up a little bit. The sentiment says, you make me believe I can fly, or something like that. And then to have the butterfly there, I put the little trail on it, so it looks like it's flying. There you go, that's the last card. So here's a quick look at all 5 of them. And thank you for joining me today. Bye-bye.